Hello and welcome back to the OTB channel. Well, as I'm sure you're all aware, it's Ubuntu release week, and a large proportion of Linux channels are reviewing the various flavors of Ubuntu. I decided I wasn't going to do that. I'm going a little bit off-piste, if you like, and I'm going to look at an open source alternative to Windows that purports to run Windows applications natively. Is it any good? Well, I'll see you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So today I'm going to take a look at ReactOS. I've not looked at this, it's not a distro, is it? It's an operating system. I've not looked at this operating system before, and there's a reason for that, and it's primarily that my channel is exclusively Linux, but I do branch out occasionally and look at other open source operating systems, such as Haiku, and that seems to have been a very popular video. And I didn't really want to get caught up in the furore of the Ubuntu release, so I thought, well, why not, do something a little different this week? So ReactOS, it's not a new project. It's been in development for well over 20 years. But having said that, it's not feature complete yet. It's still very much in alpha stage, so shouldn't be considered as an operating system that can be used as a daily driver as yet. However, it is workable. It will run some Windows programs, and from the play that I've had with it just in VirtualBox, it does appear to be relatively stable. I say relatively because I did get some screen freezes, and I did get the odd blue screen while I was playing about, but nevertheless it's getting there. And the objective, I believe, of ReactOS and its development team is that eventually it will become a drop-in replacement for Windows. Certainly at the moment it runs many older Windows programs. How well it would run newer ones, you would have to experiment. But nevertheless, for those people who perhaps have older Windows programs that they got used to and they wanted to run and they perhaps won't run on Windows 10 or Windows 11 and you can't get them to run in Wine, perhaps it does have some potential. And it may eventually become, an open source equivalent of Windows for those people who would prefer to run an operating system that adheres to the open source ethos. So let's go and have a look at the web page. Let's go and have a look at what it's meant to be all about. And perhaps also look at the big question, why would you consider using this? Right, so you should see the ReactOS website in front of you. So let's get this out of the way before we start. I am a Linux desktop user. I am not the target market for ReactOS. The Linux desktop, as far as I'm concerned, is incredibly usable. It does everything I need it to do. And although I do use Windows on a day-to-day basis for work, I have a Windows laptop, and any applications I need to use at work, I run on my Windows laptop. I don't run any Windows applications when I'm at home. Everything is done on Linux. So the appeal of an open source Windows alternative doesn't actually hold a great deal of appeal to me because I don't run any Windows apps. But I know many people do. And that's perhaps the point of this. So you see a download link there on the web page, 0.4.14, and it is an alpha. And some important things to say about this. It's a 32-bit operating system as far as the download is concerned. and it only currently supports one CPU in that downloadable version. There is work continuing to make sure it supports multiprocessors, and also so that it can be 64-bit compatible. But the downloadable version, as you get it, if you click this link here, is going to be a 32-bit operating system. So the big question here is, why would you bother trying to use an open source Windows alternative that's still in alpha, and to be honest is still very much based on the NT kernel and has a look and feel of Windows 2000. Windows 2000 was a great operating system. I personally used it. But how relevant is that today in, 2022? Well, let's go to ReactOS's own wiki page here, and they actually have a section on why use ReactOS. And as they admit themselves, this is a question that is often asked in their forums. And to kind of bring their arguments together, it says there are plenty of Nix operating systems out there which are great, but they've conquered the server market, but they haven't yet conquered the desktop market. I would agree, and I think that's unlikely to ever happen, but that doesn't mean that we aren't at a stage where the Linux desktop is incredibly mature, because it is. There's currently no operating system that implements the kernel architecture design of Windows NT. Well, no, okay, I'd admit that. Therefore, they're saying if you're unhappy with the direction or goal of Windows, but you want to stick to Windows, there's little real alternative at the moment. Okay, well, I understand that. So they're trying to be a Windows NT clone. They say here that there's no plans for any Microsoft versions of Windows to be released under the GPL. Okay, that I'll also accept that. And clearly this is released under the GPL. Linux and Wine is never going to be a complete replacement for a full Windows system. No, it's not. I wouldn't recommend Wine to anybody. It is getting better. It does have a level of compatibility, but it's certainly not like running Windows programs natively on Windows. And so if you need to run Windows programs, I'd always suggest you use Microsoft Windows. This is the bit that gets me, though. Even though Linux supports many types of hardware, most types really, Windows is still the dominant platform for device manufacturers. Okay, unfortunately, that's probably correct. There are attempts to overcome this situation, like the NDIS wrapper for network card drivers. I think this is a bit out of date. NDIS wrapper was something we used 15, 16 years ago. Certainly, there's so many native drivers on Linux now that you don't normally have to use a Windows driver within a wrapper. We have native Wi-Fi drivers and native network drivers. So actually, in terms of driver compatibility, Linux is getting pretty good. There are many people who don't like how Nix systems behave or dislike the conventions used. Okay, some people don't like Linux. They don't like the way it operates. They don't like the way it looks and feels. And there will always be those who would rather run a Windows system. I still come back to saying, though, well, why not just run Windows then, if you really like Windows? Maybe that's just me, and I'm saying this very, very much from a Linux desktop user who's been using the Linux desktop for 18 years now. Backwards compatibility, something vital for many people and companies, but the development philosophies of Linux and the GNU project don't consider it a priority. Okay, backwards compatibility is a thing. I use a lot of old hardware, a lot of old ThinkPads, and I've got to say, I haven't come across many problems. Ultimately, though, I don't really want to knock this project because an attempt to essentially backwards engineer proprietary software where the code is not open is one heck of a task. And that's probably why it's taken over 20 years so far. So as a project in its own right, I think this, these guys have to be given, lots of congratulations. Well done for giving this a go. I'm not yet absolutely convinced, though, that it has a use case. And I suppose I'm a guy in his 60s who's thinking if it's got taken over 20 years to get to this stage, I'm going to be 6 foot under before at least it gets to a version 1 release. Nevertheless, let's put that aside. Let's go and fire it up in VirtualBox and see what we think. Okay, so you should see VirtualBox in front of you now. And I followed the instructions that I found from the ReactOS wiki to actually set this up. So I've loaded it up and I've called it ReactOS, and I've set the operating system as Windows 2003 32-bit. I have given it 4 gig of RAM, but it clearly doesn't need that. I've only set 32 meg video memory, as I believe it can't handle more than that. Could be wrong. I have set 3D acceleration by default, and I've picked the standard VGA graphics driver. I've tried the SVGA one, but I got blue screens, so I'm going to go with this basic one to start off with. I've attached the ISO. I've set the null audio driver because I don't want sound from the virtual machine to interfere with the recording. And importantly, I've set the network adapter to PCNet Fast 3. So we're ready to go. Let's see what happens. And it has actually started, and just to be awkward, it started in the other screen. So let me open this up. I'm going to change it to United Kingdom. Let me see if I can at least get this into scaled mode. It might work, it might not. Right, okay, it's better than nothing. So welcome to ReactOS. What do we want to do? So press enter to install or upgrade. Okay. It's in alpha stage, meaning it's not feature complete and it's under heavy development. So it's recommended to use only for evaluation and testing and not as a daily driver. Okay, let's do enter. And the list below shows the current device settings, which all looks good to me. I see the display is set to 800 by 600 there. English United Kingdom is the language. Do we want to accept these device settings? Well, why not? This is very, very reminiscent of a Windows 2000 Windows XP install, of which during my time I must have done hundreds, so all good. Right, so we get to the partitioning entry. What do we want to do? Press enter to install ReactOS onto the selected partition. Well, there's no partitioning at the moment, but if I press enter, hopefully it should create one. And it did. It created a 39 gig partition, and we want to now format that. So I believe it's FAT16 by default, although ButterFS is an option. I don't want to risk anything here, so I'm just going to stick with the defaults and hit enter. So, setup will now format the partition. All good. Let's press enter. And wow, that seems to have done it. Choose the directory where I want to install. So it used to be /Windows on Windows 2000 and XP. I'm just going to accept the defaults here. And it's now installing, and it's going pretty fast by the looks of it. So all good. Setup's updating the system. Now, where do we want to install the bootloader? Onto the master boot record, please. And it's done it. And it's going to reboot in 12 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down. I am going to remove the ISO because I don't think it's going to remove that automatically. And we'll reboot and see where we get to. Okay, so we're rebooting. We've obviously not got much resolution here. But the good news is it has at least booted, which is good stuff. And what we'll try and do once we're into this is we'll install the guest additions. So we have ReactOS acknowledging the help and support of various organisations, including Wine, who I believe they do feedback to, so that's all good. What do we want to select here? Do we want to select a server or do we want to select a workstation? I think we'll go the workstation route, and I'm going to click Next. To change system or user locale settings, click Customize. No need to, it's already set to UK. And in terms of the keyboard layout, again, it's all set to UK. So let's click Next. The owner, OTB. The computer name, okay, we can leave that as it is. And you know what? I'm not going to bother setting a password here. I'm just going to leave that blank. Is the time correct? Yes, it is. It's set it up as GMT, which is good. Let's click Next. And we now have the option to choose some themes. So, Classic, Lautus, Luna, or Mizu. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go for this darker theme, Lutus, and hit Next. What do I want as far as the network's concerned? Well, let's just go with typical settings. And is it going to be part of a work group? Let's have a look. Let's just keep it as no. And I've successfully completed setup, apparently. And when I finish, the computer will restart. So, okay, let's see where we get back to. Okay, so we've rebooted. Obviously, the resolution's horrible at the moment, but we will hopefully fix that in a second. So I've just got it in scaled mode at the moment. And this is what I'm greeted by. A dialogue that says we need to install a driver for system device, whatever that is. Do we want to install it automatically? Yeah, okay, but that didn't work. Okay, it couldn't find a driver. So now, can we install a driver for the multimedia audio device? Well, let's go for that. And installation failed. That could be, to be honest, because I've got the audio driver set to null. Okay, so I think what we need to do now is to install the guest additions. Right, so let's go to my computer, and there's my guest additions link. And let's have a look at what these various ones are. I haven't got the full name of them here. Okay, that's the 64-bit. That's the standard x86. And there's just a standard Windows edition. So let's double click on that. Hit Next. And just follow along. And we're no doubt going to be asked to reboot again, which we'll do now. Okay, so that wasn't really that successful. I tried a VBox set extra data command, which worked fine with Haiku, and managed to add 1920 by 1080 to the Vaser driver. But it seems to have made little difference, to be honest, on React. If I bring up the control panel here should already be minimized. If I bring up the display panel, you will see that 1280 by 960, I've got it at the moment. It won't do 1920 by 1080. It does a load of other options there, but 1920 by 1080 is not an option. So we're just going to have to go with this. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is alpha software, so it is what it is. So, the big thing is it's installed. It's installed really quickly. I didn't have any errors. I didn't have any blue screens as long as I kept to the Vaser manager and or the Vaser driver, should I say. And we do get this very old school Windows-like screen in front of us. Let's see what we've actually got in terms of the control panel. The control panel looks exactly like the Windows 2000, Windows XP control panel used to look like. So if I go to the system, what's it reporting everything as? It's reporting it as ReactOS version 0.4.14. Okay, and 3.49 gigs of RAM. Computer name, hardware, advanced, all looks pretty much what I'm used to. Let's have a look at the device manager. Everything looks pretty good there, apart from obviously it's not picking up the audio, and that's because I've disabled it, so that's fine. So let's just cancel that. What about on the display settings? We should have some themes here that we can go to. Let's just see if I can minimize that. What have we got here? That looks quite nice. Okay, or clouds, or grass. So it comes with a nice selection to start off with. Hexagons. It has that very old school look, but I have to say, it does come with, oh, look at that. That's very much the Windows XP look-alike. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, that's for 1609. Okay. Angelus Blue Horizon. I quite like that, to be honest. Let's see what we've got on. I think that's quite a nice looking operating system. Oh, sorry, operating system, I mean wallpaper. I quite like that wallpaper, actually. I think ReactOS is one of those systems that really illustrates what I've always said about the look and feel. I'm never really bothered what the look and feel is like when you first boot up an operating system, because change the wallpaper, change the theme, and you can change the whole look of what you've got. Don't know why this isn't coming up. All right, okay. So let's go back to display and see what else we've got. We've got the option of adding a screensaver. Okay, let's preview that. Okay, so that all works. And what about appearance? Right, so we can change the visual style here, and we've got the lunar style. So let's just apply that. I quite like that, I've got to say. We've also got the Mizu style. That's quite nice, actually. I'm just looking at the bar here more than anything. For some reason, it's not automatically clicking onto the next window. We've got the modern style. Okay, so slight changes there. And of course, we have the classic theme, which, oh yeah, there's Windows 2000 with the menu. I actually think I quite like that Lotus theme that I originally had installed. So that looks pretty good. So the thing is, where do we go from here? What can we actually do? So we've got a command prompt there, which is your standard DOS prompt. You've got something called an applications manager here, which I believe is basically a package manager, which I'm quite impressed we've got. What I want to do first and foremost is see if we've got any sort of web browser installed, because there's very little installed on this to start off with. So let's look at programs. So accessories. I'm not seeing anything automatically at the moment. Maybe it's just me, but I can't see a web browser here. Having said that, and what would it be under? I don't think it really matters, to be honest. Let's see if we can find a web browser in here. So we have a few things here. Let's just make this bigger. We have Mozilla Firefox here, a number of versions. So version 28, 3.6, 48 and 45. I think we're on something like 97, 98 now. But let's see if Mozilla Firefox 48 will install. So I've clicked the box. Let's click install. And it's going off and downloading it, which is a good sign. And we don't seem to be getting a bad speed here. I wasn't aware it actually had a package manager. That makes things quite a lot easier, and we'll spend a little time just looking at that. Right, so we've got the setup screen. So next, 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 and let's see if it launches. We don't want to import anything. Just launch Mozilla Firefox. And there we go. It appears to be launching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a few packages, and we'll come back in a second and I'll show you where I've got to. Okay, and so we're back. You can see I've changed the wallpaper. And I have managed to install quite a few programs with the ReactOS package manager. So I've got the GIMP installed, for instance, which was working fine after I installed it. Let's hope it installs fine now, and it seems to have opened up without an issue. So that's all good. I've got the whole LibreOffice package installed. So we'll see if that launches. This is something that I haven't tried, but it seems to be working, and that's a fairly hefty package. And there we go. So we can now perhaps open up a writer document, which we can. So quite impressive on its own. And let's just exit. We've got VLC, which was working fine. And there we go. You can see that's good. And it's just obviously going down and downloading latest version. I'm just going to stop that happening. Now, I've got Winamp installed. I did have a problem with Winamp, and it's probably because I've disabled the audio output on this, but it was launching and then it was immediately locking up. So I'm not going to bother launching it now because it locked up the whole system and I couldn't do anything either. So I've got Abbey Word installed, which seemed to install without issue, and that launches pretty fast. What else have I got installed here? I also have Double Commander, which is an old school file manager, but it's now having a problem reading from an XML file, but nevertheless, we seem to be there, which is all good. What else have I got installed? Winamp, as I say. So there's Notepad++, and I know a lot of you like that. So pretty much everything I had a go at installing worked. Interestingly enough, I did have a go in between installing programs on this, on installing a nightly version. And the nightly version seemed to be a little bit more prone to blue screens. Strangely enough, though, with the VBox manage command, I was able to get it to 1920 by 1080. Nevertheless, I thought it would be unfair to show a nightly version because it is, it's likely to have more bugs in it, and it would be unfair to be showing all the blue screens that happened. But as far as it goes, I mean, this stable version is relatively stable. It feels pretty solid. Clearly, it's got some way to go before it becomes fully usable in the modern era. A 16:9 resolution would obviously be a good start. But in terms of its package manager, I feel it's pretty good. Big question, of course, is what is its use case? Well, for me, as a Linux desktop user, I have to say, none. I think as an example of an open source project, it's really interesting. The fact that it gives back to Wine is great. And I suppose if you're someone who uses older Windows programs and you can't get them to work on Wine, this could be the way to go. And it may eventually turn out to be a really good operating system for those people who are tied into the Windows world. Unfortunately, with the pace of development, before it's absolutely usable for everybody in the real world, if we're looking at another 20 years, I may be 6 foot under by then. So I think I'm going to stick with Linux. Let's have a chat. So that's ReactOS. And as I said before, you know, all due has to go to the guys who are doing what must be an absolute nightmare of a job trying to backwards engineer proprietary code. And they have got, you know, somewhere, they've got to a situation where certainly older programs run, as we've just demonstrated. Is it usable yet? Certainly not as a daily driver. I have no doubt that in years to come it will become usable, and potentially maybe it will become a drop-in replacement for Windows. But I do feel it's always going to be a couple of decades, you know, trailing behind. So I'm still unconvinced about its use case. But as a project for those involved in it, you know, an interesting task to do and to work on, I think it's great. The fact that it feeds back to the Wine project, I think is great. And projects like this keep the open source, you know, infrastructure healthy. And this is what it's all about, really. So that's it for today, guys. You may have noticed that the beast has gone from behind me, and that's simply because it's currently outside. In fact, I'm going to be jumping on it in the next half hour because the weather's just started to improve. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As normal, I'd like to say thanks everybody for watching. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, as these fine people behind me have, well, thanks very much, guys. Much appreciated. And have a great weekend, and I'll see you when I next see you. Perhaps some Slackware goodness next. Cheers.